Good morning. On behalf of the Grants Committee, I'd like to welcome everyone to the annual Grants Management webinar. See if I can get my presentation up here. I'm Diane Woodson, and I'm the District Grants Chair. Our other presenters today are Mike Quillen, our Global Grants Chair, and Mary Keeley, Chair of the Stewardship Committee. I'd also like to give a very fond shout out to Mike Mefford, our Grants Committee Chair. Mike is using his leadership skills today behind the scenes as our webinar organizer and tech specialist. I'd like to also thank all of the attendees for being here today. I noticed that we had, as of an hour ago, we had 44 people signed up, representing 29 clubs in our district. And I was delighted to see that there are a few folks signed on from outside District 7570, so welcome to everyone. Before moving into district grants, I have just a couple housekeeping points. And this is about using your buttons on your toolbar at the bottom of the screen. First of all, you will see a button called Q&A. If you have a question about the topic being discussed, please use the Q&A for that. We will also have we're planning to have short Q&A sessions after each topic has been presented also. You'll also see a button called Chat. So if you will kindly use that if you have a tech issue or any other issues other than the topic being discussed. And we would ask for this webinar if you would please refrain from using the raise hand function. And another point is we intend to make the Q&A available on our district website, DACDB, as well as our slides. So sometime after the webinar, we will send notification when these documents can be found. I'd like to move now into the district grants section. First of all, what are district grants? District grants are used to fund humanitarian and service projects. They are either done by one club or collaborative, which means more than one club. And also something unique to district grants is they need to be completed within one Rotary year. What are district grants used for? Looking at the current year, which is the fiscal year 2018 to 19 statistics, 52% of our district grants were used for community development, 30% for education, 12% we categorized as health, and 6% other. Got a couple photos I'd like to show you about this year's grants. And the first thing I'd like to say is, if you can't tell, I'm passionate about grants. And I want to say that all of you, the Rotarians, the clubs doing grants, are my inspiration. A few photos. First of all, these two photos were provided by the Forest Rotary Club, and they have a grant this year that they're working to improve hygiene for girls and women in Burundi, Africa. And I'm really excited because if you look at these two photos, there's a photo of the grant beneficiaries and the grant and the Forest Rotary Club. And what I'm looking at is the smiles are identical in these two photos. The next photo I'd like to show is from the Henry County Rotary Club. And they have a grant this year that they're supplying their local community college's food pantry. And I'm looking at the picture of these shelves, and there are no people in this picture, but what I'm seeing is the way these shelves are arranged, the care that's been taken. This picture to me says respect for the beneficiaries. And finally, I'd like to show a photo from the Johnson City Evening Rotary Club. They have a project this year of providing shoes to homeless students via their Back to School Shoes project. Again, I'm seeing very big smiles on the faces of the Rotarians. So I want to say job well done to these 3 clubs as well as all of the other clubs doing the district grants projects. Kind of like to now give you maybe the 30,000-foot view of district grants. And this year we awarded just over $106,700 in matching funds. The total project funding for these grants was almost $600,000. As far as participation, there were 43 clubs involved, over 15,000 total volunteer hours, and over 131,000 beneficiaries. So this very excited about the great participation we have in district grants this year. Just to note, there are 82 clubs in our district, so we are doing great, but there's certainly room for more clubs to participate. I want to give you just a quick snapshot of the matching grants funds. These are the maximums you see on the slide. So for single club grants, we will match up to $4,000. For collaborative grants, if it's 2 clubs, that's a $6,000 match. 3 clubs, $9,000, and 4 or more clubs would be $12,000. A couple points are, these are maximums, so there's certainly no pressure to meet the maximum. Grants can be for any amount. And just to note, a $12,000 match really means a $24,000 project. So we can do a lot of good with these funds. Where does the funding come from? The grant funding comes from donations to the Rotary Foundation Annual Fund. So give a little hint that we're always happy to have contributions to this fund. How do you learn more about district grants? If you go to the website, www.rotary7570.org, you will see a tab to click on that says what we do. And when you go to that section, you will find the guidelines, the applications, the templates, and historical data about grants. Very important, when you go to the website, do not log in. And to me, that's maybe not intuitively obvious, but make sure you don't log in and you will find all this information. Once you get into the What We Do section, to access the district grant guidelines, you click on District Grants Application, then click on District Grant Guidelines. When you see Purpose and Funding come up at the top, you'll know that you have pulled up the correct document. And the next group of slides we're going through will refer to sections of the district grant guidelines. First of all, key dates. With district grants, there is a very normal annual cycle, and this slide shows the key dates for this fiscal year. If anyone doesn't know, the fiscal year runs July 1st of one year to June 30th of the next year. So applications were submitted. The deadline, which is a hard deadline, was May 31st. Awards were announced June 15th, and you can see the rest of the dates there. The point of this slide is you can count on, these would be good working dates for the upcoming fiscal year. I'd like to talk now about grant terms and conditions. District grants may be global in scope. If you remember back to the slide of the Forest Rotary Club, their grant is for Burundi, Africa. Another point is we try not to repeat grant applications for a recently funded project. Couple reasons for that is, first of all, we want the Rotary clubs to continually think about different ways to address needs in their community. And the second point is we want our grants to be sustainable. We want to discourage partnering organizations from becoming reliant on grant funding year after year. The third is clubs are expected to have a history of contributing to the Rotary Foundation. This is maybe my favorite section of the grant terms and conditions, the thou shalt nots, and I think it was Mike Meffer that I first heard use this term. I'd like to go through these because there are no exceptions to this. Grant funds must not be used for reimbursing existing projects. That means when you submit your invoices to be reimbursed, they have to have a July 1st date or more recent. Grant funds may not be used to purchase land or buildings, for new construction or additions where people live or work, to pay salaries, stipends, or honorariums, to pay operating expenses of another organization, for personal or professional development, for establishing a permanent foundation, trust, or interest-bearing account, or for the benefit of any Rotarian or relative of a Rotarian. And a couple general comments here. The inclusion of a thou shalt not in your project doesn't disqualify your project. It just means you can't use the grant funds. And I will show a budget in just a few minutes that will make this clear on how you handle a project which has a thou shalt not. Grant certification. Applying clubs are required to identify either a primary or project contact or financial contact who is grant certified. And to become grant certified, the contact must have either viewed this webinar or attended our District 7570 Grants Management Seminar. And if anyone's wondering when the Grants Management Seminar is held, that is, the next one is handled as part of club team training. And that is in the afternoon of April 6, 2019. I'd like to move now into the grant application itself. When you start to put your application together, you want to start by using the grant template, which is a Word document. And the reason for that is if you go online to submit it, there's no way to save your application. So you want to do the template first. And that's where most of the work is. And you can see the steps here. You develop the project name, start and end date, develop the budget, describe the project and benefit. We try to keep to 300 words or less, but I don't think it cuts you off if you want to do more than 300 words. You estimate your total project volunteer hours. You include a publicity plan and also indicate partners and cooperating organizations. And by the way, on the budget, we'll review a couple sample budgets shortly. Well, actually right now. This is the first of two budget examples, and this is a renovation project by the Chatham Rotary Club. A couple things to notice here is this project had donated materials, and you will see that shows up in both sections of the grant. You see dumpster services, $900 under project expenditure budget, and then you also see the same number show up under funding. And please notice that the budget balances, that means the expenditure budget and the funding totals are equal. I'd like to now present a budget with a kind of an alternate scenario. This is a real grant from this current fiscal year. The Luray Club, this is the project by the Luray Club, and it's called Diabetes Management in Page County. It's a wonderful grant, and it was approved. And I'm showing this with their permission. This sample budget includes a thou shalt not, which is a salary, and that's in the brown area that says discounted dietitian wage, $1,750. And we want them to show it because we want to see the complete picture in the grant. And I wanted to just walk through what you do on the funding side. On the matching funds, we had to take the total of $5,900, deduct the $1,750. That gives us a total of $4,150 for the matching funds. You divide that by 2. So the district grant portion, that's the next to the last line, is $2,075. Now, the club didn't have to fund the extra, but in this case, this club said, well, we will fund the extra from our club funds. So that's why you see the club funds at $3,825. If you take the $2,075 match and add back the wage of $1,750, that's how you get the $3,825. And again, notice that the budget balances. I'd like to switch gears now and talk a little bit about partners and cooperating organizations. Those are very important. That is something that we look for in grants. We consider that a positive. Please remember that your Interact and Rotaract clubs are great partners. Other Rotary clubs are great partners. We are seeing more and more collaborative grants, and those work extremely well. And one plug I want to make for collaborative grants is you may have a club that you have the funding you need, your members are willing to put in the service. You may think, why should I try to do a collaborative grant? I can do this myself. But one important point of reaching out to other clubs and collaborating is you may help another club get started with grants, maybe another club in your area, outside your area. But that can kind of help someone get started, especially if they don't have a history of doing grants. You'll see other types of good partners in your community: civic organizations, faith-based groups, local governments, businesses. And the slides we just covered really that's the hard part of doing your grant application. Once you get that done, you then go to submit the application online. Something important for you to know is once you click on submit, you are not able to do any more editing from there. If changes have to be made, someone from the grants committee has to do it. So really, to do the application online, you cut and paste from the template. So a couple final checks are your budget must be balanced. Your project authorization letters need to be included. You've probably heard me say at least 3 times about the budget, and I know the Rotarians are very capable of doing math. What happens, from my perspective, I think that as we do editing, sometimes it's hard to go back and remember to change everything, change totals. So if you'll do some final checks there, make sure you balance your budget, include project authorization letters, then you are ready to submit your grant. I just want to make a point here that we recognize that some folks in the past have experienced some kind of tech glitches with submitting their application online. We hear you. We're now contemplating changes to the district grant application process. At this point, I don't know if the changes will be done in time for the next fiscal year's grant applications, but I wanted you to know we're working on it. The final section that I want to cover with district grants is just a few tips. And one of them is to get started early. Ideally, your president-elect should bring an outline of the grant of your grant to PETS. PETS is in April, so that comes up pretty quickly. I'll ask you to plan to submit your application early. Unfortunately, the application for the grant application deadline, May 31st, it hits very close to a holiday, Memorial Day, vacation season. If you are working on the last day to get your application in, you may find people are unavailable to sign project authorization letters. So it's a good idea to get your application done early. Another point of getting your application together early is you can ask the grant committee to kind of do a pre-review. It doesn't mean your grant will be approved, but if you want to show it to us and get some feedback, we're certainly happy to do that. And the earlier, the better. A few more tips. Please pay attention to the thou shalt nots. They cannot be funded with grant funds, no exceptions. Project authorization letters. For whatever reason, this current fiscal year, we saw a lot of missing or unsigned project authorization letters. So if you pay attention to that, please. Another point is collaborative grants. On collaborative grants, the primary club is the payee. So it works very well if the financial contact is a member of the primary club. And the other point is we want to make sure to select primary and financial contacts with a relevant skill set. there are some clubs that will have something in place, like either their past president or their president-elect is the person who does grants. Well, if you have someone that maybe isn't strong with numbers, please make sure you put someone with them to help. And in case you're wondering why we're giving the tips, if you'll notice, remember from the key dates slide, the grants committee has about 15 days to review the grants, vet them, and move on with our work. So if we have things that that are grants that have incomplete information missing, it really slows us down. And a number of the clubs with the grants, they're very time sensitive. There are grant projects that have to do with students being available for the summer. They need their funding on time. So, or back to school projects, you've got to get them done in a certain time. So we do try to get things done during our target dates. Those are all of the points that I wanted to cover. Let's see.